Thank you everybody for coming. This is a terrific crowd. I am delighted to introduce one of our assistant deans who's going to introduce in turn our guest speaker. But I'm Corey Way. I'm the Dean of Students here at SIPA, Associate Dean for Student Affairs. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our third SIPA Speaks Student Speaker Series. We started this a year ago. We've had terrific students come and speak a little bit about their personal life as well as their occupational and personal interests. And the whole idea behind it was to celebrate the amazing community that we have here. We often have folks from outside SIPA come and talk about what they do, but when we looked inward, we said there's so many amazing students that have stories to tell and amazing accomplishments to share with everybody, and we wanted to celebrate that and feature it. We've had Sam Pierre speak about his time in the Bloomberg administration working on African American affairs. We had Premji last spring talk about child development in Africa and her journey in that social entrepreneurial work. And today we're really delighted to have Shakib Noori talk about his work in Afghanistan. We are absolutely delighted to welcome all of you. There is food in the back. Please feel free to indulge throughout the hour that we have together. But to introduce Shakib in greater detail, it's my pleasure to introduce Desmond Byrne, who is an assistant dean in the Student Affairs office downstairs and is the one that really does all the heavy lifting for this speaker series. So thank you, Desmond, and thank you, Shakib.
Thanks, Corey. Hi, everybody. I'm Desmond Byrne, assistant dean here at SIPA. Thank you all so much for coming. It's actually very heartening to see the room is absolutely filled to the brim for this. It's just our third in our event. Each event, we just have more and more students participating, and I think our next one we're going to have to find a larger space. It's with great pleasure that I introduce to you Shakib Noori. He's a first-year student in SIPA's EMPA program. He's the co-founder of Freedom Learners, a new technology organization that provides education through tablets to students who do not have direct access to schools. He joins us today to discuss his own personal experiences launching this social venture and his work performing various international organizations in Afghanistan and the United States. Having served in public service for over a decade prior to coming to SIPA, Shakib has held a range of titles, including Senior Partner and Public-Private Partnership Advisor for the Afghanistan Center for Excellence in Afghanistan, Commercial Counselor to the Embassy of Afghanistan in Washington, D.C., Senior Policy Advisor to the Ministry of Commerce and Industry in Afghanistan, and Director of Investment Promotion to the Afghan Investment Support Agency in Afghanistan. Please welcome Shakib.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Desmond. I'm so delighted to be here, and thank you so much for filling the room. I know everybody has assignments, papers, studies to do, and I really appreciate you spending a moment here with me. I promise you I'll make sure it's interesting. So as Corey said, the SIPA series is about our experience, our sort of, what we have done, and SIPA is about international development. Most of you will hopefully end up in international development work. So it's good to see what U.S. engagement or international engagement in Afghanistan has done, and what I'm going to do next, and also I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. Right after my undergrad, I went back to Afghanistan and started looking for a job. My first interview, I entered into the interview with a T-shirt. And I got too lucky that I got the job, so I didn't know anything about it. Since then, I worked for many organizations. So my first job was as a consultant at the German Technical Cooperation. It's the equivalent to the USAID of the US. It's the German Technical Cooperation. I got to work as a consultant, and I was tasked to reform a massive organization in Afghanistan. So later on I became director of that organization, and then later on I moved on as senior policy advisor to the Ministry of Commerce. I served for 7 key ministers in the cabinet. So my day-to-day job was basically to provide with policy papers on trade and investment issues, reform. So a whole range of work with the international community. And later on, I became a diplomat in Washington, D.C., served in Washington, D.C., non-residents to Brazil and Mexico. Some people are here from Brazil. I love the place, so I used to travel back and forth, and also non-residents to Mexico. So for 3-4 years, I served in Washington. Meanwhile, I also set up small businesses in Afghanistan. From small bakery store to catering to consultancy, I turned into, went back after, in 2014, I went back to Afghanistan after my diplomatic mission. I started a consultancy with a few of my friends, 4 people, a consulting company, turned into 300 people. Today they have offices in Dubai, Washington, D.C., and Kabul, and doing very, very well. I helped some of small businesses. I set up a small business, a bakery. I changed the traditional bakery store to something modern, and it gave me a lot of coverage on Independence, front page. So small businesses, I'll come back to that if you have any questions, how I set up those small businesses with very minimum investment. And that's some part that I'll talk in the second part of the presentation. So the presentation has 2 parts. One is my experience and the international organizations and the international engagement in Afghanistan. What went wrong, what went right. So hopefully you will all have some sort of development experience in the future to know what, when a country starts receiving money, what happens to it. Some projects may be very good, some of them are maybe not very good, so let's see what happens. So just in case you don't know where Afghanistan is, that's where I'm from. I remember when I first came to the US, it was about 13, 14 years ago. I went to Chicago, a small family house, and I said I'm from Afghanistan. They said, well, Africa, there's a lot of donkeys. Do you guys have cars? So because it started with AF, just to make sure that I know where Afghanistan. So the international engagement in Afghanistan, what happened is, we're talking about success and failure in policy. Maybe it was policy, maybe it was management issues. These are the areas that we're going to focus. Security forces, for example, the international organization, what they do with a lot of money is they built a very good security forces for Afghanistan. They did a lot of economic development. They did a lot of work for education. We'll give you some figures on education as well. They did a lot of institution reforms. Civil society, we didn't have civil society. Today we have over 7,000 civil society organizations in a small country like Afghanistan. Freedom of press, I'm going to give you some figures later on, you'll be shocked. We only have 1 TV station and 1 radio station. And today we're going to have, I think we have over 200 TV stations. And we didn't even have I think they have 1 or 2 print media before international engagement in Afghanistan. Women were completely banned in Afghanistan to work or to get engaged in any form of activities in Afghanistan. So a huge increase in women's participation, youth and sport and health. These are the sectors that in international engagement, including the US and European countries, helped Afghanistan reform those sectors. So key success, if you see, we have a very, very well-trained national security forces, a successful job with the international money that came into Afghanistan. I think it was needed. There was no national army or anything. If you ask me a question why it was a successful project, I think there are a couple of reasons to it, because first, we did not have, it's the first time, and the Afghans, they all wanted to have a strong national security forces where a lot of money came in, and they started building the national security forces. So international engagement with a lot of trainings, a lot of money in it. So training was biggest part of building the national security in Afghanistan. Education, girls were not allowed to go to education before 2001. Now millions of girls go to school. They're allowed to go to school. At least, schools are built. But we'll come back what happens later on, whether it was sustainable or not. A lot of institutional reforms. One of my personal experience, when I got the job at Afghanistan Investment Support Agency, this agency was about 700 people, and their job was to attract local, domestic, and foreign investment into the country. So I was tasked to do, this was my first job, to reform this organization. If you would have gone to apply for investment or business license, you would have to go to 72 people and get 72 signatures and wait 6 months to get a license. So I turned this organization into completely a one-step process, and I called it a one-stop shop for investors. It became very, very successful. If you see on the chart, Afghanistan, in 2006, I started in 2003, but in 2006, Afghanistan became #1 in terms of registration. I don't know if you were familiar with doing business indicator in the World Bank. Afghanistan was ranked #1 among a lot of really developed countries in terms of business registration #1. So it was part of what we did, completely change the reform. I did the same thing with the Export Promotion Agency in Afghanistan, so it helped increase the export. With that, in 2006, we were able to bring $6.3 billion investment in Afghanistan. I want to take the credit. It was after the war and everything, a lot of investment came, but yes, there was a process. We were getting license, we were issuing license, allowing businesses. We did a bunch of reforms, laws and regulations, but that helped us put Afghanistan on #1 in a lot of countries, among a lot of developed countries. So that was my personal story where we did very well, and that became very sustainable because of the model. If I go into details, it will take more time. But the way we put the model together of a sustainable project, so that is still going on. It's not dependent to the donor in terms of its budget. It generates money. Just to give you a little bit, so that makes it, a sustainable project. But most of other donor-driven projects, usually they're not sustainable. It's called quick impact. They put the project. 1 year, 2 years after that, you don't even see it's not even existed after that. I was talking about freedom of press. We before 2001, we were only one government TV station, and if you would have to advertise or give a news, you had to write a letter and wait for it. In a couple of days, the news would be broadcasted. So it was never fresh news. It was always state. So we only had one radio. We had a lot of singers, but not on TV. You wouldn't see it in TV. Singing was allowed without music. So somebody would sing a religious song on the TV. After 2001, this was after the international came, after the invasion of Afghanistan with the NATO coalitions and all that. We've got 70 private TV stations, 200 radio stations, and 500 print media. Well, we had only 1 or 2 print media before. 20 million people out of 27 population have access to media. So this is the biggest achievement since 2001 we have. These are all good when it comes to international engagement to a country like Afghanistan. And we're thinking, this might happen to the same thing in Syria, Iraq, Yemen. There's a lot going on in the world. So it's good if you, in case, end up in, working in these projects for those countries. Keep that in mind, that what happens. What happens when you put a lot of money into a country where they don't have the capacity to absorb? Guess what happens? We're always all on the news. Afghanistan is the most corrupt country. Unfortunately, that's what happens. When you put a lot of money, contracting, it creates a bubble economy. It creates all sort of problems. Despite that, it creates, builds institutions, creates a lot of good things for the country, but it also creates if there is no system. We have to see what solutions do we have for it. So corruption is really, really big in Afghanistan. It's because before Afghanistan was not corrupt, maybe because it didn't have money. But a lot of money came in and then corruption started. So lack of sustainability in aid-funded projects is always, aid-funded projects are always not sustainable. Because again, it's a quick impact, they leave, and they, just to see, put a couple of reports together, and that's the impact of it. So maybe there's a solution for, to make it more sustainable. Creation of a bubble economy, that's what happens. Long-term employment. What happened in Afghanistan, I am sure you've heard on the news that thousands of Syrians and Afghans are going to Europe. Thousands and thousands. Why? Because, security may be number one, but it's the economic development. What created among these young Afghans, they're spending $20,000 leaving to Europe. $20,000 is a lot of money for an individual to leave Afghanistan and go to Europe. If I had $20,000, I would put another 20 on top of it, and I would start a small business. I wouldn't leave the country. But these people are used to receiving huge amount of salaries, 5,000, 6,000 salary. It was not sustainable. It was a part of that bubble economy. So they were used to it, and then once they lost those jobs, they said, well, there's no marketing, there's no jobs anymore. They start leaving the country. So that's what it happens with these projects. What they do is bring all those people. They worked in these organizations, worked in the aid-funded projects. These are the cream of the country. These are people that they have a lot of experience. Those are the ones that are leaving. If you ask me why these people are leaving, they're leaving mainly they're economic immigrants. They're not leaving because of security. So what else the international community did in Afghanistan? They spent $7.6 billion just not to grow those flowers, those beautiful flowers. I wouldn't spend a lot of money for that. And the result is fascinating when they spend their money. The result is basically that after spending a lot of money, we're still number one in the world producing poppies. So that's a lot of money. This is something that I would call it a completely failure policy. Whether it was the U.S., whether it was the European, whether it was whoever the international communities pour that money into Afghanistan. That's still growing. Some possible solutions. Because these solutions come out of my personal experience, because I was involved in some of these projects. What they did, the international community put a lot of money. They did not build institutions' capacity at the same time. So that was one of the problems, I guess. They didn't spend money through government institutions. They could have held them accountable if they would have spent money through, let's say, any government institutions or finance ministries or all of that. They spent the money through their own organizations and created contracts, and that's how it started, the whole corruption. And they couldn't hold anybody accountable for the amount of money that was spent. Local capacity was not built. It was in a small city like Kabul, there were thousands of expats from 2003 to 2013, 14. Thousands of international expats, highly paid. What they did their job, left. Let's be honest, no nation is going to build another nation. It's always, their personal interest or salaries or anything like that. If somebody offered me a good job somewhere in another country, first I'll go for the salary, I guess. I don't know about yours. The USAID and the US government, they really did not understood that if they pour a lot of money in a country where they don't have the capacity, so it was a miscalculation to put a lot of money where a country does not have the capacity to absorb it. So that was another issue to really look into. It was the nature of corruption in Afghanistan became too political. So a range of solutions that what I was thinking, maybe if they probably have thought about it, we would have been in a better place in terms of reforms. This is first part of the presentation. If you have any questions, please do. I don't want this to be too boring. Please.
When you talk about the corruption, I mean, do you have any statistics to help us understand the extent of the corruption in terms of how much was spent by the international community and how much people think were siphoned off through corruption?
I think there are reports available on SIGAR, if you know what SIGAR stands for. It's Special Inspector General Attorney's Office, where they had a branch on Afghanistan. Out of $180 billion spent in Afghanistan, I don't know, to be honest, the exact figure, but I can give you examples. For example, one of the bank was one of the private banks. Money was stolen or corrupt. It was almost close to $1 billion. Couple of $1 billion were spent on constructions and school buildings and government facilities that never existed. Huge amount of money was spent on salaries and teachers and police forces, and they were ghosts, so never existed. So it was massive, because again, it was not spent through any organization to hold them accountable. It was direct contracting and all of that. So some of the money also went to the Taliban. Some of the Taliban actually had their construction companies, and they were building roads. At the same time, they were also putting bombs on there. So what I'm doing next, if you have any other questions in that part.
Yeah, you said that the growth of poppy is like the most in the world, but has it reduced? Has the aggregate, because of the $7.6 billion, is the amount has grown? Is it less today than it was before the invasion?
It actually increased. It has increased since 2001. So it has been increasing since then. And it's fueling the insurgencies, it's fueling the insecurity. I think it's one of the lucrative business for the insurgencies that they're using. Despite they get receiving money from foreign states, they also receive money from cultivation of power. Yes.
Sorry, I'm getting over sickness, but I just want to make a comment about what you said about the Afghans who are refugees in Europe right now. You call them economic refugees, but I just wanted to know if you've actually gone there, because and if you met with many of them. I was there a few months ago with some family, and I have some family there now who have quit their job to go and interpret. And a lot of them do not seem like economic refugees. I've seen, and I've spoken to many of the families. A lot of them have brought their children. They wouldn't have done that if they didn't fear for their lives. And I've seen videos that they recorded with their phones. There was one family I met where they were actually forced to leave their home because the Taliban had come and actually beheaded his uncle looking for him. And they had videos and just like evidence, I guess. And there's constant bombs going off. And even recently in a place like Mazar, which was relatively safe, my friend posted this because she's there right now in Greece. So I just wanted to know why, because you constantly see in the news that they keep calling them economic refugees, and it's very, very frustrating because many of them are not. They're risking their children and their own lives, and their wives trying to get across the ocean. And many of them do die. So it's just very frustrating to see that, because that's why they don't get a lot of help, because the outside community and the rest of the world just sees them as economic refugees.
Look, there's a distinction between refugees from Syria and Afghanistan. The Syrian refugees are definitely leaving the country because of security.
No, I get that, I
But-
totally understand
But
that.
when it comes to Afghans, look who's leaving Afghanistan. These are people with $20,000 in their pocket. For an average Afghan family to have $20,000 to leave the country, that's a lot of money. Yes, there are cases. There are cases that people have issues. Let's say in some of the provinces they have been threatened by the Taliban or some areas. Yes, but the number is not that big. I mean, these are the whole immigration from Afghanistan started when the SIV, I don't know if you know about SIV, Special Immigration Visa started in the US. These are people that they started working with from the beginning of the US invasion. They started working with the US forces and as an translators, as an assistants and all that. When the international forces draw down and then they offered special visas for these people. So that was the start of the immigration out of Afghanistan. These people left. If you have served in Afghanistan, I know you did. Some of the people were offered these visas, and they came to the U.S. That's what it actually started. They said, "Well, the U.S. are leaving. Now Afghanistan is going back to its, previous crisis." So these people that they had some sort of level of, leverage with that amount of money, they left. And they are very, very regretted. I mean, I know some people that came on SIV in the US and they regret it.
I was just going to add the SIV populations you were talking about fits kind of that, sector of, they had enough money saved up to, leave Afghanistan, but they also, but they weren't able to through the normal channels because here in the US we've had such a roadblock and vetting system in place. That it takes too long for them to get over here through normal channels. So they say, hey, I have the money, I don't have the visa yet. I'm just gonna, try my way through the channel into Europe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So again, some of the people, yes, they have security issues, and I think the majority are economic immigrants. So if you don't have any questions on the first part of the presentation, I'm going to quickly go into the second one where I am going to launch in the next couple of months, hopefully by the time I'm graduating next.
Just quickly, you say about the media, the new number, how much of a government is controlling the media now? Out of the 70 TV channels, just like above the TV.
So there's only one TV station that's still government. Afghanistan in the region is one of the example for its freedom of speech, freedom of media. So it has, government has no role and actually really supported. Again, the international community has put a lot of force into this to create that environment for the media. All right, so
with so many medias, I just wondering, with so many medias, how do they survive with all the successful economic support?
Sure. That's a very good question. I mean, there's from the beginning of 2001, 2002, 2003, there were a lot of U.S. money that were coming. Most of these TV stations were receiving some aids from international agencies like USAID or some sort of PR or campaign that they run. But also there's a private sector. The private sector do a lot of advertising. Not all of the 70 TV stations are successful. Maybe a small percent are very successful. But the question is that they have the freedom to operate in a society with whatever they want to do with using their leverage. So yeah, some of them are not successful. Some of them are very, very successful. They actually open one TV station that I know is opened other stations in a lot of in Pakistan, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Dubai. So they expanded out of Afghanistan. All right, so I'm going to move on to what I'm going to do next. That was the first part. That was my experience.